Arm bar from the guard.
Self-defense variation. Here. Competition variation. Posture.
Okay, so let's break it down a little bit. Like I said, we've got the self-defense version. This is probably all you're going to need if you find yourself on the bottom in terms of arm lock.
Why? Because the guy on the top, very, very common, is he wants to mash you with his arms and put some weight on you. He feels like he's controlling you here, create some space for some strikes. So the thing is, when we do it in class with our friends, maybe they don't make this mistake repeatedly because they realize their arm's in jeopardy. So we're going to have an arm lock for each type of opponent. This is going to be the self-defense variation. Okay, so notice as he's putting the weight down on me, every time that he does so, his hips become a little bit light. And we'll look at this at a different angle in a second. But just when I feel his hips start to elevate a bit, he's getting heavier with his forearm, I'm going to create a frame on his neck. So I grab his trap right here, and I keep my arm bent at an angle. So essentially, if he tries to put more weight down on me, it becomes a little bit different. Now my skeleton is blocking his body weight. The fact that his hips are up a little bit because he's driving forward gives me a space to bring this arm underneath his legs. So what I'm going to do is lift my hip up, dive my arm under. When I go under, I'm palm up, like I'm going to make a bicep contraction here. Okay, so as I go, I want to start putting my head as far underneath his leg as possible, this way. Once I get in deep, I'm going to open my legs up and continue to rotate so that my shoulder is right next to his leg, and shoot my legs high and squeeze. This is very important how I do this. I want the back of my knee in the soft tissue of his neck so there's no space. In other words, it's not like this, too much space here. I'm clamping down. And my opposite leg is squeezing on his shoulder. Notice that my that my ankles are not crossed and my legs are not straight. They are clamping down. What happens, the reason I do this is if he tries to raise up his body, my hips stay in the game here. Even without using my arms, I have a good control here. Now I've got a couple different ways I can finish this. From this position, I can finish right on my back. What I want to do is wiggle away a little bit so that my body makes a 90-degree angle with my thigh and torso. That takes all the body weight off of me. He's got all of his weight on his opposite leg here, so he's quite off balance. I control his wrist. I pull it in the direction of his support leg, and then lift my hip a little. Very easy to break. Second variation is to knock him over. So if I was underneath his leg, all I'm going to do is take his weight this direction. I don't push straight against his leg. He's got a support foot with his right leg there, which makes it hard to throw him off balance. But I take him this direction by bringing my knees to my chest and leaning to my side as I lift with my arm. And I ride him to the top position, and then I finish with a simple arm lock. Okay, what you guys have seen before. Let's see it again. I think the most important thing to think about in terms of arm lock is that you want him to be off balance. If I'm attacking his arm here, I want his head to be as close over his knee as possible. Here his head is in the center of his hips and he has very strong balance. So if I were just to try to throw my leg over without off-balancing him, he could easily pull his arm out, or he could smash me pretty good, and I'm not going to be able to extend the arm, right? So notice that when we do this technique, I feel the weight coming down. I block over the top, I reach underneath the leg, and I rotate. Look at his head now. You see how it's over the knee. Try to put the weight forward on him. He can't do it, okay? This gives me the balance, control of his balance. And then I finish with the arm lock here, okay? Now, as we stated before, after he does this, you get comfortable with this move, he's not just going to be putting his arms in silly positions when you train with your friend in class. So we have like a classroom version of the move, which will, you get a lot of mileage out of this version. Also, it's more of a sport of jiu-jitsu competition version. So if you were to, try your move in a competition, the guy's very likely to be trying to posture up and make a good structure. We have to figure out how to get his arm in this type of situation. Can you turn my head a little bit here? Yeah. So what we're going to do here, he's postured up. Let's say he's got his back nice and straight. Let's say I want this arm again, okay? What I'm going to do is go for a sleeve control, and this hand here is going to go underneath his arm, and I want to try to grab his tricep as deep as possible here. Now what I want to do is keep my hips up, and I start to shake his arm across the center line of my body. I'm going to fold his hand on top. Can you move that hand? Fold his hand on top of my own elbow, and as I do that, I kind of pull my elbow up. It creates a really deep hook on the back of his tricep, so if he tries to pull his arm out, it's very tricky here, okay?
So that's how I'm controlling his hand. Since it's a competition, I'm not worried about strikes at this point, okay? I'm just worried about
Controlling his arm so that I can maneuver my hips around the shoulder joint. My second step is going to be to cross grab on the far side and pull his shoulder across my chest. So this is the first step, and start to off balance and making his head go in line with his knee. Now I got to start moving my hips. So what I do, if I want his right arm, I'm going to take my left foot and place it on his hip and start to wiggle away from him. I need to create some distance here. So I wiggle away from him. Now I'm going to use my right leg in a chopping movement. As I rotate my body to the side, using my foot to turn, I'm going to chop his back with my leg and force all of his weight over this knee. So here's the move. Now notice my arm that was pulling his shoulder down changes to a frame. The purpose for this is if he tries to drive his weight into me, he's running into two barriers. My arm and my leg that's chopping down across his shoulder. Once I make this position, it's very easy to transition my leg in front of his head, squeeze down, transition to the wrist, and lift just like we did before, okay? If you're having a hard time getting your leg over his neck, it's probably due to the fact that you're not wiggling yourself away enough. For example, a common mistake would be to come under, you make everything right here, you break him down, and you try to get the move from this position. Watch. Look how hard it is to get my foot. I'll probably have to make it at a very weak angle, and I did nothing to break his balance at this point, okay? So if I'm having a struggle, I want you guys to examine your move and wiggle back a little bit more, create some distance, and now go to turn. When you turn, keep your head up so that you create very little friction on the ground. Rotating to the side, and now you got this frame going. Always a good idea when you're learning to check and see his balance. Can he drive into me? If he can drive into you, then you're not doing it right. You need to be really making all his weight go over this knee. He's very weak. Your knee comes over, and you clamp, and you lift, and you finish, okay? So, and we have the arm lock from the guard.